Hello, and welcome to the Calm Portal, where every story is a gentle passage into a deep and peaceful rest. Tonight, we travel into a dream world shaped by belief, where people wear their thoughts like masks and truth waits beneath illusion. So as you close your eyes and soften into the surface beneath you, let your arms and legs find their own comfort and allow your body to gently settle into stillness, noticing any residual tension from the day leaving the body easily and quickly, softening your jaw, your shoulders, and when you're ready, just taking a few slow, easy breaths in through the nose and out through your mouth. Allowing your breath to rise and fall, welcoming the peace that's already beginning to rise from within. And with each exhale, let yourself drift deeper to a quiet realm just beyond the veil of dreams, where the stars watch over like ancient guardians, and a boy named Eli learns about some simple truths that will quietly change everything in his world. Eli had always been a light sleeper, the kind who stirred at the creak of floorboards or the sigh of a wind-blown curtain. But on the night of his 16th birthday, sleep found him fast and pulled him deep. He opened his eyes in a city he didn't recognize. The buildings shimmered with a strange glow, like they were made of starlight and dust. Cobblestone streets curved and twisted with no logic, and the sky hung low, a curtain of violet clouds pulsing softly overhead. There was no sun, but everything was lit in a silvery hush. People moved through the streets, quiet as shadows, but what Eli's breath, what made him pause in the center of the road, were their faces. Every single person wore a mask, not painted or decorated. These were raw and strange. Some were cracked down the middle, others were twisted in pain or worry. A woman passed him wearing a mask that read, "I'm not enough." Another man behind her wore one that simply said, "Don't look at me." Eli touched his own face, but there was nothing, no mask. "Newborn," someone muttered behind him. He turned. A boy his age stood leaning against a lamppost made of vines and bronze. He wore a soft white cloak and had the eyes that would make you feel like he already knew you, like maybe he'd read your thoughts before you'd had them. "You're in the dream world," the boy said, pushing off the post. "And you haven't picked a mask yet, which means you're still waking." Eli started. "Dream world?" The boy nodded. "A place between what you believe and what you actually are." "Are you real?" The boy smiled. "Real enough to annoy you." He offered his hand. "Call me Soul." Eli hesitated, then took it. Soul's skin was warm, grounding even. "Come on, we don't have long. The mask will start calling to you soon." As they walked together, weaving through the quiet city, the air smelled like wet leaves and old pages like memory. Eli kept staring at the masked people. None of them spoke. Some bumped into each other and just kept going. Their masks didn't just say things, they felt loud. "I don't understand this place," Eli finally said. "You don't have to, you only have to wake up." "I thought I was awake." Soul gave him a sidelong glance. "Most people think that." They reached a courtyard, At its center stood a tall, round mirror framed with feathers and flames. No one else seemed to notice it. Sol pulled Elias forward. "This is your first door," he said. "To go home, to truly go home, not just to your bed, you'll need to learn your 5 truths. You used to know them, but you forgot." "Truths?" Elias echoed. "Yes, between your soul and your spirit, between the real you and the dream you've become." Sol pointed to the mirror. "You ready?" Elias stepped forward. The mirror didn't reflect the courtyard behind him. Instead, it showed a vast open desert. The sky was gold, the air hot and shimmering, and a figure stood alone under the sun, tall, cloaked, unmoving. And just like that, Eli was no longer in the city. As he stood in the desert, the heat pressed up against him, and his clothes were suddenly lighter, looser. The sand felt oddly soft underfoot. The figure in the distance turned and began to walk toward him. Eli waited. The figure stopped a few feet away and pulled back his hood. It was Eli, but older. Eyes sharper, shoulders straighter. He wore no mask, but there was a faint glow around his throat, like something powerful pulsed beneath his voice. "You've forgotten," said the older Eli, "so I'll remind you." The desert faded. They now stood in a grand library, endless rows of books stretching into the clouds. The older Eli reached for a scroll on a nearby shelf and handed it over. Eli unrolled it. "The first truth. Always stay true to your word." "You speak spells every time you open your mouth," the older version said. "To others, to yourself, every word creates or destroys." Eli remembered calling himself stupid the week before when he failed a test. He remembered telling his sister she was annoying. He remembered biting his tongue when he wanted to tell someone they mattered. "What if I don't believe the good things?" he asked. "Say them anyway," said the older self. "Your word becomes your belief." The scroll rolled itself shut and vanished. The desert returned, but this time the sky had softened to orange, like the sun was ready to sleep. Eli stood alone now, the scroll's lesson burning gently inside him. He turned and the city was behind him again. Sol waited at the edge. "Found your first truth?" he said, nodding with approval. "How's it feel?" "Big," Eli whispered, "like it's been waiting for me." Sol smiled. "It has." As they walked deeper into the city, Eli noticed something strange. One of the masked people paused and looked at him. For a second, her mask flickered. The words, "I'm not enough," faded, and her real eyes blinked through. Then the mask returned once again. "She saw you," Sol murmured. "Even for a moment, that's how it starts." Eli looked down the curving road ahead. He didn't know where it would lead, but something inside him, something deeper than belief, older than fear, knew he was finally walking the right way. The next morning, if it was morning at all in the dream world, Eli woke to birdsong. Not chirps or calls, but soft echoing notes like glass chimes swaying in warm wind. He was lying in a bed of moss beneath a tree with leaves the color of moonlight. And when he sat up, Sol was nearby, crouched beside a creek with water so clear it looked like liquid sky. "Did you sleep?" Eli asked, brushing moss from his sleeves. Sol shrugged. "Not really the point here." Eli stood. "Where are we now?" Sol pointed toward a gate ahead, tall, carved from stone, wrapped in flowering vines. "The second door. You ready?" Eli didn't answer, but his feet moved forward. As he stepped through the gate, the air shifted. The city was gone again. Now they both stood in a massive garden, Wild and endless, the flowers breathed softly, yes, breathed, rising and falling like sleeping lungs. It seemed there was a glow of energy around the border of each and everything he saw in front of him. Every tree seemed to hum with its own song, and the air was full of voices, not spoken ones, remembered ones. He heard, "You're too sensitive. You always ruin everything. You should smile more." Each sentence echoed like a whisper in his ear, though no one was near him. Eli turned in circles, disorientated. The voices came from nowhere and everywhere, old echoes that somehow still had sharp edges. Then he saw them. Ghost-like figures, transparent and drifting, stood among the garden paths. Each one wore a mask just like the people in the city, only these masks didn't show what they believed. They showed what had been said to them. Even the smallest wore a mask that said, "Mistake." Eli backed away. "You can't outrun them," said a voice behind him. He turned. An old woman sat on a rock nearby, weaving golden thread into a long tapestry. Her hair was silver, her skin lined, her eyes full of storms and stars. "Who are you?" Eli asked. "I am just a weaver," she replied. "I gather the words, and then I show them for what they are." She gestured to the ghosts. "These are not you, but they still hurt." Eli nodded. "Of course, words dig roots. But here's the truth." She stood and placed a hand gently over his heart. "What others say is never really about you. It's about them. Their pain, their fear, their dreams, all projected." Eli felt something break open in his chest. A moment later, the ghosts began to blur. One by one, their masks cracked, faded, and fell like ash. The garden quieted. A scroll appeared, tucked gently into a tree branch beside him. He pulled it free. "Second truth. Don't take anything personally." "Every opinion is a reflection," the old woman said, "and not always a clear one." Eli looked at his scroll. The words seemed to glow, not just with light, but with freedom. The woman smiled. "You're not the names they gave you." And just like that, the garden dissolved into mist. He was back in the dream city, standing on a rooftop under a sky thick with stars. Sol was waiting there, sitting cross-legged on the edge. "You made it," he said. "Second truth." Eli nodded. "It hurt, but in a good way." Sol leaned back on his palms. "Most people don't even know they're still bleeding from things said years ago, but you pulled one of the roots." Eli sat beside him. Below them, the masked people slowly walked through the streets. He watched them differently now, not with judgment, but curiosity. What had they been told? What were they still believing? One girl's mask read "too much," another's read "too quiet." Eli touched his chest where the weaver had placed her hand. It was still warm. "Do they ever take them off?" he asked. Sol looked out over the city. "Sometimes, when someone sees them anyway." The next threshold looked like nothing, just fog, dense and silver blue, floating in slow motion across a field of white. Eli squinted. "Where's the door?" "You don't need one this time," Sol said. "Just walk in." Eli took a breath and stepped forward. The fog thickened around him until everything else disappeared. Even the sound of his own breathing grew faint. It felt like walking through thought, like he'd stepped inside a dream within the dream. Then, ahead of him, a house emerged from the mist. It was crooked, leaning to one side. made of warped wood and cracked windows. Smoke curled from the chimney, drifting sideways instead of up. The front door was open as if it had been waiting. Eli stepped inside. The house was full of mirrors. Every wall reflected his face, hundreds of versions of him looking back at him. Some were angry, others afraid. Some looked just like him, and others wore faint traces of masks. But the strangest part was that the mirrors whispered. All whispering thoughts he had heard before. She's laughing at you. They think you're weak. They only pretend to like you. Each mirror spoke a different version of the same idea, what other people were thinking. Elias turned in circles, trying to escape the noise. His chest tightened. He could feel the anxiety and fear crawling and creeping up his body. A voice behind him asked gently, "Why do you believe them?" He turned. A child sat on the stairs, small, barefoot, no older than 7. His eyes were wide with that kind of fragile clarity only children still carry. "Believe what?" Eli asked. The child pointed to the mirrors. "All those stories. You don't know what they actually think, but you tell yourself you do, and then you hurt yourself with it." Eli looked again. The mirrors weren't showing truth. They were showing fear. "I don't want to believe them," he whispered. The child stood and walked to a mirror with the words, "She's disappointed in you," etched across it. He pressed a finger to the glass. It rippled like water and the words vanished. "You could ask," the child said. "You could tell the truth. You could be brave." Eli walked to another mirror. "They think I'm weird." He touched it. Ripples. Gone. Soon the whispers faded. The house was still. A scroll unfurled itself on the wooden floor. Eli picked it up. It was the third truth. Don't make assumptions. "You waste so much of your life guessing what people mean," the child said, "and punishing yourself for those guesses." Eli nodded slowly. He thought of every time he'd heard silence and turned it into rejection. Every time a sideways glance became an insult in his mind. Every time he'd written a full story in someone else's head without asking a single question. He looked down at the scroll. It shimmered once and vanished. Outside, the fog had lifted and Eli stepped back into the golden light. Back in the city, Sol was sitting beside a fountain carved like a tree growing from a book. "Well?" he asked. Eli sat beside him. "It's strange. The more I learn, the quieter it gets." Sol nodded. "That's how you know it's working. Less noise, more space, peace and all that." They watched the city together. A man walked past with a mask that said, "No one understands me." For a second, Eli imagined what might happen if someone simply asked him what he was feeling and listened. Sol tilted his head. "Most people don't see others, just their own stories about them. And when we assume, we turn those guesses into pain." Eli smiled. "I really feel like I'm waking up now." Sol smiled back. The path to the fourth truth was steep. It wasn't a door this time. It was a trail, narrow, winding upward through mist-draped cliffs. The dream world sky had turned a soft grey blue, and the air was cooler. Eli climbed slowly. The stones beneath his feet were uneven, and the higher he went, the more his legs ached. Every now and then, he paused to catch his breath. Sol didn't come with him this time. He said, "This one, you walk alone." The wind picked up and the mist started to thicken. Then, through the fog, Eli saw a shape ahead. A figure was curled at the edge of the cliff, stacking stones with careful, shaking hands. His clothes were worn and torn, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. He barely looked up at Eli as he approached. "You don't have to climb," the man said hoarsely. "You could stop here, everyone does." Eli blinked. "Why?" The man gestured to the endless rocks around him. "Because it's easier to try a little, and then say it's too much. Safer not to care too much. You can't fail if you don't finish." Eli looked at the stones the man was stacking. They kept falling. He'd rebuild them slowly with trembling hands, and then they'd fall again. He watched for a while, unsure of what to say. Then he knelt beside the man, picked up a stone, and tried to stack it. It fell. He tried again. It stayed, for a moment, and then it slipped off. The man gave him a sideways glance. "You're wasting your time." "Maybe," Eli said, "but I'd rather try." They worked in silence for a while. The mountain wind grew colder. Then Eli lost track of time. He just kept stacking, unstacking, breathing, sweating, stacking, unstacking, breathing, sweating. And at some point he realized something strange. The effort wasn't painful anymore. He'd found a rhythm, a presence. His hands moved with patience and not pressure. And then, just as he placed the final stone in the stack, it stayed, balanced and whole. From behind them, a soft voice said, "That's what it feels like." Eli turned. An older woman stood there wrapped in a cloak of moss and feathers. Her face was lined with kindness and her eyes crinkled when she smiled. She placed a scroll in his hand. It was the fourth truth: always do your best. "But what if it's not good enough?" Eli asked. She sat beside him. "Good enough for who? Your best will change. Some days it will look like brilliance, other days it will just look like getting out of bed." Eli thought about the stones. He thought about how many times they'd fallen and how it hadn't mattered because he'd kept trying without punishing himself. It wasn't about perfection, it was about showing up. The old woman nodded as if she could read his mind. The scroll shimmered, then vanished. Eli stood. The sky had cleared. From the mountain top he could see the entire dream city far below. The winding streets, the glowing rooftops, the people moving like thoughts through the night. He breathed it all in. The view didn't make him feel big or small, just real. He began to descend the mountain, not because the climb had ended, but because he knew now that he could just keep going. And at the base of the trail, there he saw his old trusty friend Sol waiting beneath a tree. "How'd it go?" Sol asked. Eli smiled. "Like peace and tired muscles." Sol tossed him a small apple from the tree. "Sounds like you did it right." Eli caught it, took a bite, and looked towards the horizon. A flicker of gold shimmered in the air. Not a sun, not quite, but something was rising. And in his chest he could feel it. One more truth waiting. As they made their way through to the next world, this one looked nothing like the rest. There were no dark corridors, no ancient halls, no trailing mountaintop. Just a quiet field stretching endlessly in all directions. Soft hills swaying with wildflowers and grass as tall as his waist. The sky above was violet blue, melting into gold at the edges. It was dusk, or dawn, maybe both. He couldn't tell. The wind moved gently, whispering as it passed, but the whispers weren't voices this time. They were feelings. He felt a tangle in his chest. Sadness, or maybe fear. But as the breeze moved on, the feeling softened. Then came something warm and light, a memory of laughter that had no picture, only sound. He breathed it in. The scent of the air was like citrus and honey. He took a few more steps. The field hummed. And then he saw them. People scattered across the hills, each person stood in their own patch of flowers. Some were crying, some were singing, some were still. One woman was laughing so hard she'd fallen to her knees. A man nearby just stood with his arms stretched out like he was waiting for the rain. They weren't wearing masks, but they weren't hiding either. They were just being. There was a boy sitting cross-legged in the grass, his eyes closed, his chest rising and falling softly. He looked about Eli's age, and then Eli saw another figure closer by, a small child, a little version of himself. The child had his back to Eli. He was drawing circles in the dirt with a stick. His shirt was too big for him and his shoes didn't match. Eli froze. He didn't feel ready. The child turned and looked at him. "I'm scared," Eli admitted. It came out like breath, not words. The little boy stood. "I know," he said. And then something unexpected happened. Eli didn't rush to fix him, didn't hug him, didn't offer advice or apologies, just sat down beside him. A breeze passed through, heavy with grief and joy and confusion and love all at once. But Eli didn't run from any of it. He let it wash over him, the way you let waves hit your ankles when you're tired of fighting the ocean. Beside him, the boy sat too. No one needed to speak, because something else was happening, something Eli hadn't understood until now. Every emotion wanted love. Not silencing, not solving, just love. The angry parts, the tired parts, the jealous parts, the ones that still needed attention, the ones that had done harm, all of them. As he lay there letting it all wash through him, he felt a crack start to open in his chest. Not painful, just open. The child leaned his head on Eli's shoulder, and they stayed like that until the boy shimmered like sunlight on water and faded into the wind. The flowers nearby bent slightly as if bowing. Then Eli stood and walked forward. Ahead of him was one final figure. Not a shadow, not a version of himself, just a man, middle-aged and weathered. His hands calloused, his eyes kind. He looked like he'd made every mistake and forgiven himself for all of them. He held no mask. He didn't need one. He nodded at Eli. "You made it," the man said. "To what? To the truth?" "Yes," the man smiled gently. "That love you're seeking," he said, voice like wind in tall grass, "isn't something you earn by getting it all right. It's not a prize for being perfect. It's what you uncover when you stop resisting who you are, when you stop trying to fix what was never broken." Eli felt his chest rise and fall. A breeze moved through the field. Not cold, not warm, just present, like it had always been there. The shame, the fear, the need to control, they didn't disappear, but they softened. They didn't grip him anymore. And without all that tension, he could finally feel something else. A quiet, steady warmth deep inside, like love had been sitting at the center of him this whole time, just needing to be uncovered from all the rubble on top, just waiting for space. When Eli stopped pushing his feelings away, when he stopped trying to be more lovable, more wise, more anything, he became available to something vast, to peace, to life, exactly as it was. And in that stillness, Eli finally understood that his value wasn't waiting at the end of some path, and he didn't have to wait until he was finished growing to be worthy of love. He was already enough, exactly as he was, ever unfolding and becoming whoever he wished to be. Thank you for joining me in the Calm Portal. The portal to calm is always within you.